Welcome to Shelby Cast. We're interviewing Lindsey Hammond, and moderator is Joseph Townsend. He's been so kind to let us use his conference room. I'll let him take it.
Okay. So, what made you decide to run for county council first off?
Well, this time or last time? I don't know. Okay, so 2 years ago, I ran for my district seat against Tom Harris. I was just fed up with my taxes continuing to go up year after year, and thought it was insane that the county budget had grown almost $100 million in 10 years. And so I decided to put my name on the ballot, and I have a finance background. So I worked in accounting for over 10 years in the private sector, and I dealt a lot with budgeting and looking at our financials and comparing actual spending to budgeted spending year over year, looking at trends and variances, because in the private sector you want to be as lean and efficient as possible because you're trying to benefit the bottom line, and I think the government should have that same aim. But unfortunately, when it's other people's money, they're not as efficient. So I was like, well, I'll go ahead and I'll run and we'll see what happens. And so I entered the race, and then a third guy entered the race, and so there were three of us, and I ended up getting 32% out of a three-way race. And Tom got less than 50%. So I think that was, God called me to run, but I don't think he intended me to win, because I think it was supposed to be a wake-up call to Tom, like, hey, you got less than 50%. You need to be more, what do you want to say? You need to be more in line with what the people want. And the one thing I did see out of that, though, is I went around and I saw all the advocacy that was needed in our own community. And I think that God used it as an opportunity to open my eyes to the advocacy that was needed in my community, because the government is not listening to us. Our voice doesn't matter. They're not representing us well. If you're going to represent the people, you need to engage with them. You need to communicate with them. You need to know what their concerns and what their thoughts are. And if you're not doing that, then you're really not representing them. You're representing your own interests, you're representing business interests, you're representing other elected officials. And so I started in a community advocacy role of going and speaking to people, being boots on the ground. I've been a grassroots leader. And then I would go to public meetings and I would speak on the behalf of the people, trying to get their voice heard. So this time around, a lot of people talk about their vote doesn't count. My vote doesn't count. I go in, they make all these promises, they don't keep them. Or I go in to vote and it's all incumbents, so nobody's running against them. And so this time I was not going to run. Logan started talking to me last fall. And so he's like, Mom, you should really run. And I was like, I don't think so. I don't feel God calling me to do that. And then I got closer, and he's like, you really need to run. He started building a team, and I would get these messages from people all the time. Hey, are you running for office again? And I'm like, Logan, ? Because he was really trying to get the word out there. And so it got closer to the date. And then I was like, nobody is running against these guys. One of them has been in there since 2008, so he's been in there 16 years seeking a fifth term. Two of them have been on there since 2018. They were appointed via caucus, and then in 2020 in the primary they ran unopposed. So two of these guys for 6 years haven't had to answer to the people as to why they should continue to represent them. So I got a little righteous anger going on, and I'm like, that's not right. People are saying their vote doesn't count. Someone needs to run against these incumbents. So Logan and I were checking the report every day. And it got down to the last day, and no one had filed. And so I felt this voice saying, you're the someone. And that could have been Logan's voice, by the way. I was like, okay, let's do this. So we hopped in the car and we went down. And I literally walked in there an hour before the filing deadline to put my name on the ballot. And I was like, I guess we're doing this thing. So that was a long-winded way to answer your question. Apparently, I'm picking up like Grant and I'm turning into a politician and answering a simple question with 5-minute answers.
Well, you said that there's specific things, I guess, that made you want to enter. Is there a specific? So you're in a pick 3 race.
Yes.
So is there a specific person of the three that you think are least deserving of another term?
Okay, so there's a lot of issues that have come up in the last couple of years since I ran that I've been involved in personally. The fire districts, so they went, and I kind of feel like the people were railroaded. We weren't really informed about what was going on, and we were put into, actually for my township, we were supposed to have a meeting March of 2020 to discuss going to a territory. Well, they canceled that because of COVID. Well, then I didn't know until the following January of 21, they rescheduled that meeting in 2020, June of 2020. When the height of COVID, everything's going on, people are like locked down and everything, and they're going to have this meeting, and they put us in a fire territory, and no one knew what was happening. And then in 22, they expanded our fire territory and added Scipio and Leo, because originally it was Cedarville, or Cedar Creek, Springfield, and Grable. Well, as soon as they had us in a territory, then all of a sudden in October of 22, they're pushing for a district, and they're asking the commissioners to form a district, and by the end of the year, we were in a district. So with this change, you take this from the township level, where your elected individuals at the township were kind of in control of the territory. Each township board had a member that was their representative for their township on the board. So it was still under local control. Well, then it went to the district and it became county control. Well, actually, quasi-county control, because it was in between. It's a fire district board now, which is an unelected board. So we have more unelected bureaucrats raising taxes on us and impacting our daily lives. Yeah. And so they're appointed by the commissioners, but we have no say over who they are. But they're creating budgets and they're levying tax on us. And the county council, the county commissioners will claim that they're just in a kind of an oversight appointment role, that they're not really there to, I can't even say they think they're in an oversight role. They think they're just in an appointing role. And so this board, these fire district boards, are just doing whatever they want. There's no oversight. And then the county council has to approve their budget, so because it's a county tax. And so with that, a lot of people, when you went from a township, a lot of people had a lot of townships had volunteer fire departments. And I could see what they're saying there, that they were not having the volunteers that they needed and needed to go full time and everything. But as soon as you went to the territory, you could, basically your max tax levy was reevaluated. So they could raise your taxes again, which before they were capped at the levy, and then they'd have to have a referendum if they went over that. So then when we went to the territory, you open that up and you raise the levy again, so they're able to substantially raise taxes. I live in Springfield Township, and we saw, we probably had our small budget, what do you call that, a cum or whatever budget for the fire department was probably like $350,000 or whatever for the year. We've gone from whatever that was to $4 million in 4 years. That budget has grown.
Yeah.
So, and that was $4 million was not even as high. They wanted to go to 4.5 in ours. So if you look at these now, the fire district tax was a big one. I was instrumental in fighting back for Springfield Township or Northeast Fire District. And so we went and we said, there's no way they need, it was like some 58% increase in the budget. And we're like, they don't need that, what was it, like $1.3 million. So they actually dialed it back $500,000. Originally, ours failed. The vote failed on our budget. And then Paul Ogman's like, they asked Nick Jordan, well, what do we do? And he said, well, they would go back to a territory. They would no longer be a district. They would have to, they'd have to vote to, repeal the resolution or whatever, so that they could go back to a territory. However, if they didn't file paperwork with the DLGF, the Department of Local Government Finance, then they would not have a budget and they'd stay the same. So then Paul Ogman is like, well, we've got to keep them going through the budget process, so he motioned to reconsider. And then, our budget, it was actually, Kyle Curley said they have 20% growth for the year. We should give them at least 20%, which, okay, so we're all we asked for was organic growth, right? We want organic growth, that's fine. When ours looked different, because Northeast, you're not building all the housing additions and stuff like you are Northwest right now, or Southwest or whatever. So they have the need. They have more houses. They have more chance for fire and emergencies. We don't have that. And so we have a lot of empty farmland in small towns. And so they were going to give them 20%, and then he rounded it up to $4 million, which actually gave them an extra $200,000 in their budget. And so that was something that I was involved in. I think the council felt that they had found a compromise, except the majority of the people that went in there were against the budget increase. They were against the whole thing because now we were all educated, we were all informed, and we wanted to go back to a territory and then have them convince us as to why we should be a district. Yeah. But they passed it. They probably felt that, like I said, they probably felt it was a compromise because they gave them some money, but not all that they wanted. And so a bunch of people walked away from there feeling like we were victorious on our side. And now if you look at the different districts, so then they went through ours again and they voted on it and it passed, obviously. But nobody from the other fire districts went and fought back against their budgets. So now you look at these budgets, let's see, Aboy increased 6 times what it was in their territory, or their taxes 6 times what it was in their territory. Lake and Marion were 10 times what they were. Northwest was 2.6 times, and all of Southwest minus Marion is 3.3 times. So ours was 1.5 times because we fought it. We would have looked probably like Northwest if we hadn't. And that just shows that you need an active populace involved in government, because a lot of these places now, like in Aboy, they're getting their tax bills. Yeah. And their tax bills, some of them are doubling because of this. Yeah. And in addition to property values going up, and they're taxing us on unrealized gains. But they're like, what in the world? So the fire chiefs actually had to do a press conference and explain to the people why what they told them it was going to be, it was much higher than what they told them it was going to be. And they're like, well, we have this cost and that cost, and so those people weren't involved. We have great elected officials at our township level in our district that had informed the people so that we could make calls and send emails and go to the budget hearings and fight back against that. So that was one of the issues I was involved in, and one of them where I was like, again, not only has the budget increased over $100 million, I don't know what it is over the last 2 years, but that 10-year period up to 2022, but they're not listening. They're not listening. We don't have a voice because obviously everyone going in there for our budget was against it, right? They should have handled that. I mean, they did handle it differently than the other ones, but not as much as I think they should have in my mind. So that was one of the issues. And the other was the jail, which became a big issue, was starting to become an issue when I ran 2 years ago when they were trying to figure out what to do about the jail. Well, that's another issue where they think that just because not everyone is out there screaming at the top of their lungs and showing up in their meetings, they feel that like there's only the small portion of the people who are not happy with the way that whole project or what went, And so there are a lot of people that are not happy with the way that went, but they're not vocal about it. Only a small portion of the people are actually vocal. That's like what I do as a community advocate. I go and I speak to people, and then I go to the meetings on their behalf. They don't all attend the meetings, but there were a lot of people that were upset with that and saying, well, maybe we did need a jail, but we don't need the Cadillac of jails. And why are we spending all this money on this compared to other counties? Yeah. So that was another issue. So all these things kind of showed me that they're not really paying attention. They're not really in touch with the people. They're so out of touch, and they just think that everything is fine, but really people are unhappy and they feel like they don't have a voice. And now, they don't care, my voice doesn't matter, and my vote doesn't count. Yeah. And I mainly ran to let people know that somebody does care. Somebody does care, and somebody will engage with you and will go to fight with you and give you a voice.
Have you ever heard of Agenda 21? And
yes.
Well, that's what a lot of this stuff is. It's why it's so cookie cutter across the state of Indiana. Not just Indiana. It's like everywhere. Yeah. And I drive, so like I drive, kind of look, and I look, and I'm like, oh, well, the same programs are here as in Indiana. Yeah. And so like it's like how would so and the Seymour, Indiana thing with that has a lot to do with the IDC or that
IEDC.
IEDC.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like that whole setup of non-governmental agent or whatever, the groups, and then
the NGOs, non-government
NGOs,
organizations,
and then the government. What is it? The nice word for fascism: public-private partnership.
Public-private partnership.
Yeah. Like these groups, like they spend money and they talk about how they're bringing in all this money, but it comes at a cost.
Mm-hmm.
And right now we're getting the pretty things, and we're also starting to get the legislative things that are that we can't touch. So how would you combat? Because it is foreign influence. It's UN.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone that doesn't believe that, like you can literally go look up Agenda 21 now, and it's not hidden anymore. How would you combat those from coming into the county?
All right. First of all, I'd like to preface this with, I am not suicidal in any way, shape, or form. I do not plan to take my life anytime soon. I just want that on the record. I feel like when we talk about these things, you got to preface it that way. Yes. So we have the IEDF, so the Indiana Economic Development Foundation. And I think Brad Chambers, running for governor, is actually involved in that. And they raise private money to send Holcomb to the World Economic Forum, Davos and stuff, right?
Wasn't there a congressman too? I can't remember.
I'm not sure, but Holcomb proudly displays it on his website for governor, that he goes there and he talks about what is that next steps or whatever we're doing here, which is all tied into Indiana economic development. Yes. Yeah. And so then we have the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. This used to be a commission, so it used to be a governing body, and they privatized it. Okay, so then the IEDF raises private funds, sends Holcomb over to World Economic Forum, and then the state gives billions of tax dollars to the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, and then they give that out in grants and stuff to our local level, right? Yeah. And so they do this to push those initiatives that are coming from the World Economic Forum, Agenda 2030 initiatives. It used to be Agenda 21. Yeah. And so we're seeing that. And not only are we seeing legislation, we're already seeing the what I want to say, the impacts of that are not so nice. So we're all paying for it, right? They take our tax dollars, they're investing it to bring businesses here, like Google, like Amazon, and so they're throwing tax dollars at them to bring them here. Yeah. And then so when you bring businesses here, economic development, if you do it right, is not a bad thing. So if you see that you have an industry that you want to grow in your area, you can use the money to grow that industry, create jobs. That's good. You're creating jobs, which is then increasing the tax revenue, the business tax revenue, which then is supposed to offset the people who live in that area. Okay, but our government doesn't do it that way. They throw money at companies, businesses, big corporations to bring them here, and then they give them tax abatements or some kind of government subsidies to offset the tax that they're supposed to be bringing here. Yeah. And then you have like Google that was like 30 jobs, right? Or you have Amazon that comes here and substantially pays way above any other businesses in the area, so now they've got to pay higher. Well, now the cost of everything goes up, so our cost of living goes up. So what they do is they tout low taxes, they tout low cost of living, and they bring these businesses here. Well, when the businesses come here, they bring people. Yeah. And those people buy houses. And now you have a market where you have more people looking for houses than you have houses available. That drives up the cost of homes.
Don't they also, so like we've seen that here, but one of the things they also do is like so the places where like normal folks can afford to rent space, they then tear those down and build new like outlets and stuff, and then they bring outside corporations to fill those because the local people have a really hard time paying those rents because it goes from like like 500 or something like that to like $2,000 like high.
Yeah. We saw that with electric works.
Yeah.
We put all the tax money into that, and it's really expensive to rent space. Yeah. It'd be the same thing with what they're doing at the Pepsi building. Tax money bought the Pepsi building downtown. Tax dollars is going to pay for that to be, what do you want to call it? The disposition cost. So they're going to, work on that to remodel that building, right? And then they're going to rent that space or sell that out. But the taxpayers aren't really seeing a benefit from that. Our money is being thrown at that. But I don't really believe that you want government and private business in bed together. Public-private partnership is not good for the people. We're seeing, corporations are benefiting from it, the government's benefiting from it, the people are not benefiting from it.
Yeah.
And we're even seeing that especially now where the price of housing is being driven up. Because you have people coming here from, say, California. And so they buy houses sight unseen because they're moving here, and they don't mind paying $50,000 above market, right?
Yeah.
Which then, when everything else is based on comps, that drives up the value, right? It drives up the cost of everything. And they don't mind what we would call the higher cost of living or the higher taxes as part of that, because where they're coming from, that's still much lower than what they were paying, right?
Yeah.
Or people coming from Chicago. And so now a lot of people's tax bills are going up substantially because the price of their property has increased.
Oh.
So the government is benefiting from our properties increasing in value because they're taxing us on unrealized gains.
And that's often the allure of sustainable development.
Mm-hmm.
Is they come in and they say, well, look, property taxes will go up, you guys will get more tax money. And then, like, talking about the commissions and stuff, they go by like regional councils and stuff, which
Yeah.
and they will be unelected officials.
Yeah.
And then the policies actually start taking power away from your local officials
Mm-hmm.
to make decisions. And like, so, but the gain, like, so Tom Henry, everyone says, I like what he's doing because
Yeah.
he's but they don't understand the price that's coming
Yeah.
with that. And now, like my property taxes, like, whoo, they
Yeah.
skyrocket. I was like, oh Lord, like we didn't do anything to the house.
Yeah, our house, we've not done anything to it, and our value over the last 2 years has increased about $50,000. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And this started substantially around the time of COVID. Before that, you really didn't see these huge increases. And now all of a sudden, so people look at economic development, and we've had booming economic development, but now we're starting to see the ugly side of that.
Yeah.
That results. So we all paid for it through tax dollars, and now we're continuing to pay through the nose for it because the cost of everything's going up because of the economic development. And this is due to Fort Wayne trying to be a big city. Well, when you have a landlocked city that's trying to be a big city that's surrounded by small farming communities, you start changing that city and making it a big city, you're changing the culture for everyone in that area.
Yeah.
And we're not in Indianapolis or Chicago. And we don't want to be. People come here to get away from that,
Yeah.
and they're bringing those policies here.
Oh.
And people come here to get away from that. People who are lifelong, people who have lived in Allen County their whole lives don't want to see that either. So now we see people being taxed out of Allen County. They're moving to DeKalb, they're moving to Huntington, they're moving to Wells, and now it's a ripple effect because now the prices of their properties are going up.
Yeah.
Because everyone's moving there and buying up the homes. So I think that we're just trying to grow too fast, too much too fast, and they're trying to make us something we're not.
Yeah.
Because we are the largest county geographically in Indiana, but we're the third largest population-wise, and we're the home of the second largest city. So what they want to do is, the goal is to move out and develop everything and make make all of Allen County Fort Wayne, just like Marion County and Indianapolis. They want a unigov. And with that, you're moving closer to centralized government too. You're stealing the power from the lower level and moving it up. And I don't think that that's a good idea.
Would you agree with? So I was thinking about it, and like people I know, and actually growing up, I have friends that come from the mud, like from like bad neighborhoods, stuff like that. But and now, so I went from I was adopted, so I was kind of. But like now I see, as I start to make more money, and then actually some of my friends, they're making more money, like some of them have stopped going up, like because the more the money they make, the more taxes they have to pay. And so, sorry, my point is, would you agree that like property taxes and then income tax and other taxes create caps for the for poor people, because you can only go so high, and then once it becomes so difficult after that point, and that it's becoming more and more difficult. So it stops people from being able to, like, if I want to buy a house, but then I have to pay that property tax, I can't afford it. And then with everything else that's going up, like, it creates a ceiling for, like, because America used to be the place where you could start out poor. It didn't really matter. You could, skyrocket and be someone big. But now they're creating ceilings where we can no longer easily. I mean, it never was easy, but it was never this hard. So. Well,
and I will say, first and foremost, I'll say I grew up in poverty. I was raised by a single mom. I grew up in a trailer, and we moved into a double wide when I was in high school. I moved from Ohio, actually midnight on my 18th birthday. So my 18th birthday, I left home. I moved to Indiana and went to college. I had to pay for my own college, put myself through school, and I worked really hard to get where I was. And lower middle class. Not bad. But now, in order to be lower middle class, you have to, I think they said your salary has to be like over $200,000. You have to make like $225,000 a year to be considered lower middle class.
Yeah.
That is absolutely insane. We would have called that upper middle class a few years ago.
So the money I make now, like, if I would have made this even like 5 years ago, it'd be an easy life.
Yeah.
But now I just feel like I'm making all this money doing this stuff, and I still feel like I did when I had just minimum wage, because all the expenses, my electric's going up, everything's going up.
Well, even houses. The cheapest house you can find in Allen County right now is $250 or $250,000. There's a house down the road from us. It's a tiny, probably no more than a little over 1,000 square foot house, probably 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom. They want $287,000 for this house.
Yeah.
It is on a tiny lot. It's like right when you get inside Harlan, and that is absolutely insane. Yeah. That house, a few years ago would have been about $100,000 less. And it's insane. So what I've accomplished, 25 years ago, I don't think, over 24 years ago when I moved here to Allen County and started my life and worked really hard to get where I was before I left my career in 2011 to be a stay-at-home mom. I don't think that's possible today. I do not think that's possible. I have a 21-year-old son, and he's getting ready to get engaged, and he said, "Mom, I've been looking at houses, and between house prices and interest rates, he's going to be 21 in July. He wants to buy a house." He goes, "I don't think I'm ever going to be able to buy a house." Yeah. But the thing is, renting is just as hard, because you want to rent a house, you're going to pay $2,000 a month. That's more than my mortgage is.
But some of I paid $400 something a month for an apartment, our first apartment. That same apartment today is over $1,000. And then some of these 1 bedroom something, they're paying like $1,200, and whereas years ago it would have been like $500-600.
Yeah.
Not even that long ago. So because I had worked with someone, he was like, "Yeah, I pay." I was like, "How much you pay for the apartment?" He's like, "I pay $1,200." I'm like, and we worked at a security job, and I'm like, "On this wage, you're paying that much money, and then you're also feeding yourself, and he had a significant other, and then he's like, yeah, he has to work 2-3 jobs." Yeah. It's a shame.
The American dream, they are dismantling the American dream. You know what I mean? And it's because of decisions that have been made by those that are elected to represent us, and they've not been representing us well. And it's the allure of the money. It's greed. It's money, 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 and we're sacrificing the people's interest the people's interests are taking a back seat to politics in the name of progress and money. And it's unsustainable. The path we're on is completely unsustainable, especially for the country is a mess. But even in Allen County, it's a mess. It's a mess here. And people, our children, my children and my grandchildren are never going to have the opportunities that I had, ever. And I can't even imagine trying to do what I did 24 years ago now. It would be impossible. I feel so bad for people that are in that situation, and that's kind of one of the reasons I'm running. Is I'm we have to do right by the people. My campaign slogan is people and principles over politics. When the government makes decisions, the people's interests need to be at the forefront. Yeah. And then we apply constitutional principles, and those two things should take priority over politics. Because I'm so sick of them playing the political games and the people always coming out on the losing end. Yeah. That is why our property taxes are high as they are. They created this mess. They're the ones that continue to throw our tax dollars at businesses and bring them here under economic development.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I was going to say is the relationship between our commissioners and county council is very dismal. So how would you work with, the commissioners and trying to keep that relationship not as horrible as it is?
That is a very good question, and I've been thinking a lot about that. It's almost like my brain has jumped forward past the primary and past November to what I would do if I was, to take office in January. And Kayla actually asked me that this morning. She's like, okay, so it's primary night, you find out you win. What's the very first thing you do? The very first thing that I would do is I would schedule a sit down. I would schedule meetings with the commissioners and the other council members because there's a lot of things I don't know. I've never served in office, but there's a lot of things that have been going on I would like to get up to speed on. And I'd also like to sit down and talk with them and form a good working relationship because, we're all elected. If I get elected, we'd all be elected to serve the interests of the people. And we need to work together first to be able to serve the people. And when you have people in your government infighting with one another, the commissioners and the council not getting along with one another, I understand if you are, you have to be true to yourself, right? You have to be true to yourself and your convictions, and my convictions will be standing up for for the people, giving them a voice. I understand that. If you're just like, hey, you're not doing what's in the best interest of the people, so I can't work with you until you decide that you want to work in the best interest of the people. But I don't know if that's what's going on, or if it's just, I don't like the way you do things. Is it political games, or is it really, is it personality, clashes? Is it political games? What's going on there? But the ultimate goal is to do what's best for the people, and those in government should be able to get along to do what's in the best interest, to do the people's work.
Yeah.
And I think if they were communicating with each other better, and they were engaging with the community and communicating with them better, I think we wouldn't have half the messes we'd have. You'd have people that would have understood the fire district. You'd have people who understood what was going on with the jail. But the government hasn't done a good job of even communicating with each other and working with each other, let alone with the public. And I believe the best situation is when you bring government and the people together and they can collaborate on things. Because we are a government for, of, and by the people. The people are a very important component there, and doing the people's work, doing what's in the best interest of the people, engaging with the people and empowering them to be part of the process. Why can't we do that? So to answer your question, I've even talked about, we need to do the Allen County Goodwill Tour. We have a PR problem. We have a PR problem with Allen County government right now. People do not trust the government. And this is becoming worse and worse because they feel they're not being heard. So, we need to repair and rebuild that relationship. And I'd say, let's go to neighborhood association meetings. Let's attend township meetings. Let's go and engage with the people and say, what can we do for you? How, what are your thoughts? What are your concerns? How can we best serve you? Because that's the reason I'm running. I'm running because local government needs to serve the people better. I don't know if that answered your question or not, somewhat.
Yeah.
We're all going to sit around and sing Kumbaya, around the campfire.
It's just some people will say that the commissioners expect council to vote a certain way, and if they don't vote that way, then that's what strains the relationship. But if council's the one getting the calls from people in regards to the topics, and the commissioners aren't, then I think that's how the relationship can get strained. So it's sort of like what you're saying is if you get the people involved and the commissioners hear from them to begin with, then maybe they'll understand why council's supportive or opposed to something.
So for instance, the jail, right?
Yeah.
So with the jail, the council did not pass the tax rate increase that the commissioners wanted. And even when they went to vote on the jail, the council, some of the council members still had questions about how all this was going to work. And so the first time they voted not to proceed with the bonds. And then they had another meeting and they brought it up again. And we had, Josh Hale, Ken Freeze, and Kyle Curley were voting against it because they still wanted to have questions answered. And then you had Paul Lageman, Don Weiss, Tom Harris that were voting for it. And the tiebreaker was Bob Armstrong. And they decided to go with that and to proceed with the project. Even though there were still questions out there about how all this was going to work and the contracts and, all that. So that's tricky because the commissioners, it's almost like communication shut down, and they just, you had news interviews and stuff where they were, not very flattering of the council, and the council had very unflattering things to say about them back, and I don't think you can have that. I don't think you can have that breakdown because you still have to serve the people, and you still have, I understand, they both kind of had their ways they were coming from, but did they all come to the table? Did they all come to the table together and talk about it and say, okay, why, we have questions about this. Can you answer our questions? And then explain to us why you want this high of a tax increase. And, well, we're the fiscal body, and we don't believe that that's in the best interest of the people because we don't think we need the Catalan jail. Why can't we do what they're doing in these other counties? Was there that back and forth and that open communication? I don't know. Would that have made a difference? I don't know. Sometimes you just have a clash of personalities, and some of these people have served for so long that I don't know if they're used to things happening a certain way and it's not, or they just, they don't get along with each other. I'm not sure what that is. Well, but yeah, it was a pretty interesting thing because you had a lot of people that were reaching out to the council members saying, we don't agree with this, and so they're trying to push back and they're trying to do right by the people, and the commissioners didn't like that. Yeah. But was there some more communication that could have gone on to kind of work through that? I don't know.
I don't think it matters, not that's not what I mean. That was the right way to put it. That's not what I meant.
You don't think it would matter?
Yeah, right? I think it's controlled because when Curtis Hill was here, he said something very interesting. He's talking about how politics aren't really controlled by the politicians. Mm-hmm. It's controlled by money, and there's he said there was 4 or 5 people that actually control the stuff in Indiana, right? Or I guess you could say groups. I don't know if it's people, it's groups. But and then we also see with more freedom-minded candidates that the establishment often pushes them to the side and then picks the candidates that are willing to play ball. And so, I think that, I'm trying to say this, honestly, I think that that there's no real difference between Democrats and Republicans. My own experience watching it, 'cause I used to be a Republican. I'm pretty far right, but watching it, what I see happen is when the Democrats can't get something done, mm-hmm. They'll switch parties, and then they'll get that, whatever that is, done through the Republican Party, and then it just goes back and forth, and they're all moving towards this more control, more power. And that's why the thing in Seymour and Warsaw, that whole development plan, mm-hmm. and how it's Republicans, Republican mayors, and they're ignoring that. When you go in Seymour and you read the story about the citizens trying to call the mayor, and he's ignoring their calls, mm-hmm. And so and talking about how people voted are tending not to vote for Republican, or they say they don't feel like they have a choice. Mm-hmm. It's because their choices really are dwindling, because they get promises, and then the next thing you know, mm-hmm. you got that thing that they promised that they weren't going to vote for, they voted for. Mm-hmm. And so if you get in there and it turns out that it's not just miscommunication, but it's actually an agenda, are you willing to name names? And because people don't have a target. So right now, I like psychology, and what for crowd control, or what they do is they make everyone anxious, and mm-hmm. it makes it really easy for them to create targets, and that way people, when we see that all the time, people funnel.
It's like the Hegelian dialectic.
Yeah. And how would, so if it's not Yeah, would you be able to, or sorry, I went. So would you be willing to name names and then give people a target so that they know what they need to fix? And like
yes. And those in government know. I am the least, let me say, I'm not their favorite pick to be running on this ticket. I have been very vocal in the past with different bodies of government. I'm not afraid to call people out. I'm not afraid to use the bully pulpit if I need to, and expose things. I mean, that's kind of what I've been doing in Allen County the last 3 years. And that's why you'll see when I ran against Tom, a lot of these elected officials donated money to him. And a lot of them, it was for the first time because they wanted to keep me out.
Yeah.
Because I'm not afraid to challenge the status quo that they all want to maintain. Even this time, I have a lot of my money has come from individual voters that I've talked to their doors. The majority of that. And I only have 4 donations over $1,000 I had to report, right, or contributions.
Yeah.
All of mine has been raised from the people, and others, if you look at theirs, there's a lot of money that's been raised from elected officials because they want to keep particular people in office. And when I ran before, it was keeping Tom in, keeping me out. Now there's certain people that they want to keep in there, and because they like working with those people. Is there an agenda behind that? I don't know. I won't know until I get in there, right? You know, I'm sure I won't be informed of all that until I've settled in. And but I'm not afraid to challenge the status quo. And I'm not the person they want in there. I can guarantee you. And if I do get in there, I will have a target on my back in 4 years when I'm up for re-election. Because I'm not afraid to say what needs to be said. I'm a passionate fighter. I can come across as being a sweet, charming, docile person, but I have a feisty side, and a lot of them have already seen it at public meetings and stuff. I've called them out on things on the record in their meetings, in their public meetings, and during the comments section, and I've called them out online, and I stand for the people. That is, and if you're an elected official, you should stand for the people. I'm a community advocate. I'm a grassroots leader, and that's what I've been doing. I've been promoting the people's interests and fighting for them. And there's just so much you could do on the outside. They're not forced to listen to me and engage with me. There's 2 of them, or there's one of the guys. I sent him an email. One of the guys I'm running against. I sent him an email back in September of 21. Just saying, hey, I'm getting involved in local politics, and I kind of want to know how things work. Could we sit down if you have time, whenever's convenient for you? Got nothing back. Sent that same individual, an email in June of 2023 saying, hey, do you know anything about this SB4? What could we be watching for at the local level? Yada, yada. It's coming down the pipeline. Nothing. Before the fire district meeting, I sent an email to every single one. They were all in one email, this massive email. None of them responded except for Josh Hale, because I had asked a question about the legality of him voting on the fire district budgets because he's a fire chief.
Yeah.
And he ended up, he didn't need to abstain because he's still under a territory, not a district.
Yeah.
So he could have voted, but he chose to abstain, and I really admired that about him. But none of the other ones responded to that. So I have emailed, I have tried making contact, I've gone to their meetings. None of them want to engage with me. You know what I mean? But that just shows how little respect they have for the people that they serve. And they know what they're getting with me. And that's why they really particularly don't want me in there. But there's 4 people in a race where they're choosing 3. And I have overwhelming support from the people, and they know that.
Yeah.
And so it would be interesting to be a fly on the wall and hear some of the conversations going on behind closed doors right now.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people are really excited to see things get shaken up. I think the dynamic on the council will change tremendously if I'm on there. Because one of the first things I'll do, and I'm gonna be out with it right now. One of the first things I'm gonna do is try to form my conservative alliance of 4, because you need 4 to pull the majority on things.
Yeah.
So all I have to do is convince 3 other people to join me, and we can make a difference for the people in Allen County.
So I'll ask one more question.
Sorry, bugs.
Well,
Sorry. I was sitting here like itching the whole time.
So what?
I think we should say, for full disclosure,
Yeah.
I found a tick climbing around on me or crawling around on me earlier. So I'm like really itchy now because of that
She brought the chick
situation.
in here.
So I don't have like fleas or anything. I'm just got the heebie-jeebies a little bit from that tick.
Yeah. So.
I kind of threw you off.
I know
Didn't I? I do that from time to time. Throw you a curveball.
What taxes would you vote to abolish? So, like, what are some of the things that you would vote against, or if you could, you would vote, or when you're there, you'll vote to get rid of, like, especially because, like, I hate property taxes and stuff like that, like.
Well, like the wheel tax in particular, is that something that county council could abolish still?
Well, see, that was something that they when did they implement that?
It was implemented earlier, and then in 2016, I believe.
Yes, I was going to get to that. But prior to 2008, it was implemented, and it was supposed to. It's one of those temporary taxes that was supposed to sunset, right? So we have like the Coliseum tax. To build the Coliseum, 30 years ago, that was supposed to sunset and never did,
Yeah.
And then you have the Tin Cap Stadium, and now you have Electric Works, and you have all this riverfront. All these temporary taxes that never end up sunsetting. You know what I mean? And it's like, so the wheel tax was one of those. In 2016, they voted to extend it out to 2029 and to increase it. Okay, I don't know about y'all, but I live in Northeast Allen County, and our roads are terrible. Like, that wheel tax was supposed to go into working on roads.
Yeah.
Southeast, terrible. Northeast, terrible. I think all the money for the roads is going to the west side of the county.
Yeah.
Southwest and northwest, they got beautiful roads out there, beautiful sidewalks. You have the east side of the county.
No, we don't.
Okay, except for Wayndale.
Yeah, Wayndale doesn't have any sidewalks.
So if any city council, Fort Wayne City Council members are watching this, Wayndale really needs sidewalks. You need to allocate some money to give them sidewalks because it's ridiculous down there. Off that soapbox. But my roads are terrible. So I'm paying this wheel tax just like everyone else. And I'll tell you, a lot of people outside of Fort Wayne say, you know what, we pay all these taxes and we get no benefit because they take all the county money and they sink it into Fort Wayne because that's all they care about is Fort Wayne. They don't care about us out here.
In downtown Fort Wayne.
Yeah. Well, if you go, I'm telling you, you go to Northwest Allen County, you go to Southwest Allen County, totally different than if you go to the east side of the county. We're like the redheaded stepchild of the county or something. So yeah, I mean the wheel tax, like where's that money going? They're not fixing my road, so I'm like, why are we even paying that?
Yeah.
But there was another thing I was thinking, like all these temporary taxes.
Yeah.
I mean, just to digress a little bit, in 1913, income taxes were passed and implemented as a temporary tax to pay off the debt because they implemented the Federal Reserve, right? We had the Federal Reserve, so now we have a central bank loaning money to our country, so our country is running up debt that the people then had to pay back. So it was supposed to be just paying back the debt for a war, and then they decided, hey, we really like having this money because now, before that, they had the government wanted to spend money, they had to get the buy-in from the people to get them to purchase government bonds to raise the money necessary to pay for the projects or the war or whatever. And they're like, hey, this is easy. We just have the people give us money. And so it continued. So no tax is ever a temporary tax. If the government implements a tax, it is there forever. Look at all the taxes we pay. And whenever they want to raise more money, they just impose a new tax. Or now, they're benefiting from unrealized gains on our property. So one of the first things I would do, and I would, if Micah Beckwith becomes lieutenant governor, I will work with him, and I've already reached out to Tyler Johnson and said, we need to do something about locking in people's value when they buy their home, locking that in as the tax basis for the time they own the home. And you don't reevaluate that until you sell the home, because that's when they have their gains. Otherwise, it's just a tax burden to you. I'm so sick of hearing, well, your taxes are increasing, but think about it, your property value is increasing. Well, my property value increasing doesn't do me jack crap
Yeah.
unless I go to sell it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything. It's a tax burden. The government is benefiting from my house increasing in value. So if we lock in the values, then if the government wants to raise the taxes, they actually have to increase the rate, and it's more obvious to the people.
Yeah.
Plus, what is the point of having the 1% tax cap at the state level if people are never going to reach the cap? Or, I've talked to people recently, I've been around all 4 areas of the counties, northeast, southeast, northwest, southwest. I've been talking to people all over for weeks, and people are upset. They're upset about their taxes. And I had somebody I talked to just the other day, and she said, we reached the tax cap years ago. Our home was paid off. We reached the tax cap, and she goes, they keep raising our value every year, which that tax cap doesn't do anything because it's a percentage of your value.
Yeah.
She goes, so our taxes are still going up. So she goes, what's the point of having the tax cap? Because it's not protecting anyone. Because they found a loophole around it.
It's basically you don't own your land. Like it's an affront to private property.
Yeah.
And like property tax should not exist because if it does, it should only be a one-time thing when you purchase the home or something. Because
if you truly own your home, why are you having to pay the government to use it?
Yeah, the
your
land.
property. Yes.
Try not paying your property taxes once and see what happens if you really own your land. So,
Yeah. Well, and you also have local income taxes. You have
Yeah.
property tax, you have local income tax, and actually, the largest portion of what people pay in their property tax is actually for schools.
yeah.
And our schools are being not being run the greatest right now, and a lot of people are pulling their kids out. So as they're pulled out, school funding. I'm going to digress for just a moment. I don't even know if I answered the last question. I'll finish that up real quick. So there are the taxes that should have sunsetted that I think should go away. Yeah. But in addition to that, I have a background in accounting and looking at budgets. And what I would do is I would go back and I would look at the last 5 to 10 years of actual, like, what was appropriated. So the budget amount, what was appropriated and what was actually spent, line by line, and find out where we can cut out. Because every dollar in there should be benefiting taxpayers and residents of Allen County, and if it's not, then it needs to be cut.
Yeah.
So we need to start there, and we need to stop using this mentality that we always have to adopt to the max tax levy and take as much out of the people's pockets as we can. Because if you leave money in the people's pockets, they can stimulate the economy. You don't take money from me and then the government use that money to grow the economy and create jobs. No, that's not the way it works. You let the private sector do their thing, and you leave money in people's wallets so that they can go stimulate the economy. And then everyone benefits, and you have a balanced approach to economic growth. But going back to school funding. So school funding, 20% of it comes from property taxes. 70% comes from the state level, from sales tax and gas tax. And then 10% comes from the federal level. And that's usually for free and reduced lunches and whatever grants that they decide to give to the schools, mainly so that there's strings attached, right?
Yeah.
And you always have that. I'm so sick of this mentality that we have to get our money back from the state, and we have to get our money back from the federal, because that's tax dollars that Hoosiers sent there. And if we don't get it back, it's going to go to New York or Illinois. Okay, but one thing that we all have to understand is when money comes back from the federal level or money comes back from the state level, there's always strings attached. The federal level of government was meant to have limited power, right? They had national defense, interstate commerce, and general welfare, and then they just throw everything under general welfare, right? Yeah. The states maintained power. Well, the way they took power is they implemented the income tax I talked about earlier. Then under FDR, under the New Deal, he implemented they had the Payroll Tax Act. So before that, when you paid your taxes, you paid them up through the local level, and then they sent them to the state and onto the federal level. So the federal level only got their portion. But once we implemented the Payroll Tax Act, then you have the federal government taking the biggest chunk first. And now they give it back to the state and they give it back to the local level. And that is how they maintain control. They have power that they shouldn't have because they do it through the money and the strings attached.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. If we were going to abolish taxes, I would say Congress needs to repeal the Payroll Tax Act.
Yeah.
And we need to go back to doing it where we send it up to the federal level, and so they can't have control over our states.
Yeah.
Because that's the biggest chunk of tax that you pay. And so even with the schools, they have that money come back. So the schools, the majority of what comes from the state is based on enrollment, right? So you get $10,000 to $16,000 per child depending on the school. But what happens is so you pay property taxes. I homeschool. So a lot of people in our area have pulled their kids out and started homeschooling. But I'm still paying my chunk, like 67% or whatever of my property taxes to the school.
Well, so it's the school though. During COVID, they pretty much homeschooled everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But, sorry.
Yeah, and here's the thing too. If you pull your kid out of the school, the state just takes that pool of money, and then places like Indianapolis or whatever, their schools get more money.
Yeah.
So the sales and gas tax, when we pull our kids out of the schools and we start homeschooling, our area isn't getting that money because we don't have kids in the schools. So they do that based on enrollment. So that money's going to go elsewhere, and these other schools are going to get more money.
Yeah.
Because they're still going to take that pool of money and dish it out.
How does it? So, from my understanding of I've talked to other people, and they were talking about how even though sometimes states raise the money or they raise the level of money they're going to give to schools to pay teachers and all that stuff, it often gets eat up by the teacher unions, and then they add more in administration instead of the money filtering down to the teachers. So, I mean, how would you address that, or if you could, whatever.
Well, what I would suggest is having your schools locally ran and locally funded, and just take the state out of the equation altogether. Because just like we don't like the federal government, the federal Department of Education dictating what happens in our schools, I don't like the state dictating that either. I think you should have, you should have local control, local funding, and then your public schools should have to compete with private schools and with homeschool, because they shouldn't just be a default, because right now they're not benefiting our children. I started back in 2021 going to school board meetings. That's kind of where I started on my political journey, getting involved. I'm like, I'm just going to start at the lowest level and kind of figure out what's what, and started going to school board meetings as a homeschool mom. And I told him, I said, it doesn't matter if you're a public school parent or a private school parent or homeschool parent. We all need to stand together and fight back against what's going on in these schools, because all of these kids are the future of our country. And we need to make sure these kids are getting a good quality education, and they're being educated and not indoctrinated, because that's part of the problem. And that's where your federal tax dollars coming into play. Before was the indoctrination portion, right? And now you even see it coming from the state level. So we just need local control of our schools. You should be able to move to an area. I like power closer to the people, because then the people have influence. The culture of that area has influence on the government, and you can move to an area where you want to live, where you enjoy the laws, you enjoy the taxes, whatever. So I want more decentralization of government, because I think that is the best way for the people to be served well and be prosperous. I don't know if I really answered your question there. But.
You did. You said 20%. The home
state.
Tax,
no, local, from property taxes.
From
20% of school funding comes from property taxes.
And the studies have shown California, because they spend like the most, and it doesn't really affect their. So how could, like you said, you already kind of.
Because we already see that. We see where as funding, goods will say we need more money for schools, we need more money for our schools. But as the funding has gone up, the test scores and everything have actually dropped. Like pumping more money into our schools isn't having an impact, and I don't know what the answer is, because I've not really been involved in that, the teachers in the schools will say, well, we need parents to be more involved, the parents need to be more involved at home, but I know from when I used to, before we homeschooled, I sent my kids to private school. And I would get my kids up early in the morning, I would send them to school, they would come home in the afternoon, they had all this homework to do, it cut into our family time, right? But I made sure they did their homework. But then my daughter's sitting here saying, I'm like, well, what is this notebook? It was at the end of the year or something, I think. And she's like, oh, that's my busy time notebook. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, it's my, I'm done, now what? And I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, it's busy work. If I get done with my stuff and we're waiting for all these other kids, then I work in this notebook. And I'm like, okay. So, it's just stuff like that where kids are at school all day long, and I homeschool. I went from homeschooling, from having my kids at school 6-7 hours a day. we get done with school in like 2 to 3 hours, and then they don't have homework, right?
Yeah.
And so when you are a parent and you're working all day and your kids are in school all day and you come home, you shouldn't also have to do the school's job of educating your children at home.
Yeah.
So parents need to be involved. I 100% agree. I'm a homeschool mom. Parents need to be involved.
Yeah.
But you send your kids to school to be educated. You shouldn't have to turn on and teach your kids at home.
Oh,
You know, and we always went through these, like I would be like with my son, like, what are you supposed to do on this project? And or I'd try helping him. He's like, that's not the way we do it in school, Mom. You don't know what we're supposed to do. And so like half the time I didn't even know what he was supposed to be doing, and I couldn't even help him at home. So they're trying to put it on parents and say parents are not involved, and that's the problem. Well, most of the time parents don't even know how to help their kids at home because there's not communication between the school and the parents.
And
parents.
they change up the math, the Common
Yeah.
Core. I don't even know how to do Common Core.
Yeah. Well,
I just heard how
yeah.
to.
Well, and parents work all day, and then they're trying to maintain a home, and they're trying to get their kids fed in the evening. They're trying to get them bathed. They're trying to get them put to bed so they can get them go to school the next morning. We don't have time to come home and then educate their children. That is what the schools are supposed to do. You know, in Indiana, in our Constitution, we have Article 8 that is for common schools, right? So our government in the state of Indiana is required to provide common schools to the children, or to educate the children.
Yeah.
So state constitution says we have to have schools, but it doesn't say they can't be, you know, when that was first put in our constitution, a lot of them were church ran schools.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't mean they have to be big conglomerate public schools. They can be locally ran and locally funded, in my mind.
And I think
my understanding.
Let me think. On this topic, we kind of already addressed a lot of it, but so like with critical race theory and these things permeating the schools, and then even we kind of on the other one we talked about how the kid was in trouble for having an American flag on his truck at school, and then they wrapped his truck, but in the American flag, which is a cool story, but how would you address that? Because like even so, my son during COVID brought they gave him little laptops, and I think a lot of parents, that's when they decided to homeschool, when they started seeing what was on, because it accredited the government for a lot, and I'm like, I told my son, like, I can literally show you that this is where where the government caused the problem, and they're saying that it was the government that fixed it, and so like the indoctrination is crazy. So how would you, or what policies would you support to kind of curb the indoctrination and they're lowering the standards too, like, so.
Well,
yeah.
A lot of that is coming through that 10% funding from the federal government, right? They're pushing that through the federal government through the grants. So if you accept this grant money, you have to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
So I think just cutting out the federal, I'm all for abolishing the DOE, the Federal Department of Education. And I'd even be as far as say, bring it to the local level. Just give it to the school boards. And why is the state even involved in that to begin with, right? Yeah. Just have your schools, they're elected school boards, let them do it. Let them select their curriculum and all of that, because we don't need indoctrination in our schools. They're teaching our kids to hate our country. Yeah. That's why the American flag thing. They didn't want him to fly the flag because they want them to hate America. Yeah. And our schools shouldn't be teaching our, the future leaders of this country, the future of our country, to hate our country. Yeah. It's ridiculous. Why have we let this Marxist agenda in our schools in the first place? Yeah. Why are we allowing this to continue? And I love to see the rise of Moms for Liberty and everything, all these groups fighting against this, because it's not right. We need, and it starts with, we need the school to recognize parental rights, because they weren't even doing that for a while during COVID. Yeah. And there's a lot of people I know that started homeschooling during COVID because their kids were doing remote learning, and they're like, screw this crap. Yeah. I don't want you learning this. And they went and pulled their kids out of school and started homeschooling. Yeah. Because before that, they didn't know, because the schools are so good about hiding it, and kids don't know to come home and tell their parents that. It reminds me of the saying, if you send your kids off to Caesar, don't be surprised when they come back Romans. Yeah. And that's what we've done. We've been doing that for years, and that's part of the problem. Look at our country now. After 60 years of government-ran school, look what our country's turned into. Yeah. And that's what they've done. They've snuck this Marxist agenda into our schools, and we need to get that out of there.
That's
And a lot of that comes from the federal grant money going to our schools. And now I think, like I said, I think they're even trying to work some of this in at the state level too.
Oh.
And getting education, like I said, control over education and funding at the local level is going to be the best thing that we can do. And then, let them out in California or New York, whatever. Let them ruin their schools, but we don't need our schools ruined by this crap.
Yep.
Well, in regards to taxes, I know Bob Armstrong has a sign that says no new taxes. So what is no new taxes to you?
Well, I have that very same question, Joe. What for me, no new taxes means I won't vote for more taxes. I mean, in mine, that means you're not going to vote to increase taxes.
Yeah.
But I think for him, I don't know. I'm not going to put words in his mouth. But by looking at his voting record, he voted for the jail. He voted for the fire districts. Voted to increase the wheel tax. All these things. He's not against voting to increase taxes, but here's the thing. He's not voted to implement any new taxes because the wheel tax was already there. All they did was extend it, increase it. The jail is actually technically a lit tax, right? It's just a special lit tax. The state said they could raise the lit tax a certain amount to pay for the jail. The fire district tax, I don't know. That was a new tax at the county level, right? But it had become a tax at the territory level first. So, and he didn't create the districts. So I'm thinking from his standpoint, I'm asking the question, maybe he thinks that as long as he doesn't vote to implement any new taxes, he's keeping his promise. But I'm sure a lot of people look at that and think, oh, no new taxes. This guy's not going to raise my taxes. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, voters out there, he has raised your taxes a lot.
Yeah.
And when I first got involved in 21, I was told, if you're going to talk to somebody on council, go talk to Bob Armstrong because he's the most conservative on there. He's a strong conservative. He's the most conservative on the council. Go seek him out. And so I did. I sent him the email in September of 21. He never responded to because I really wanted to learn. And I thought, I was directed by somebody I really respected and admired to go check this guy out. He's a big conservative. But I've been watching their meetings since then. He's not very vocal. Even if he is a strong conservative, he's not vocal and he's not trying to fight for the people and for their interests. And then I don't know if he's being convinced to vote a certain way or if it's of his own volition. I don't know. But I would say, no new taxes means I'm not going to vote for tax increases. I put a pledge out there. I heard he said, I will not vote to increase taxes and I will not vote to implement any new taxes because I think we have enough money in the budget that we could find ways to make that work.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to be raising any taxes. Like I said, I want to lock in property values, and I also would like to see, taxes phased out for retired folks. We have so many retired individuals on fixed incomes that are worried about losing their homes because they can't pay their taxes.
Yeah.
We have young families that are struggling to put food on the table, and we're hitting them in times of record inflation. I'm also a health coach, so inflammation is a normal word in my vocabulary. Record inflation and families struggling, right? And the cost of everything is higher. Everyone's having to tighten up their belts, and the government just keeps hitting them with more and more taxes. The fire district tax, a lot of people, that hit them hard. The new jail tax isn't a property tax; it's a lit tax, so it's another 0.11%. With that said, I see people struggling. Farmers, the cost of land substantially increased. So farmers are taking a hit, and I think that's by design because if you have your farmers that are struggling to pay their taxes and make a living, and then you have this developer come in, most likely subsidized by the government, comes in to subsidized through public-private partnership, comes in to offer them top dollar for their property so they can build a Google data center or something, they're not going to be able to turn it down. It would be stupid for them to turn it down. So we have other farmers that are now struggling because farmers have sold out.
Well, I was going to say, so I recently was talking to a councilman that voted for the increase with the fire district, and he asked me what my solution was, and I mentioned to him that we could get rid of TRA and we'd have all that extra funding for the fire district, and he said yes, but that wasn't even proposed. So because if the fire department, if you talk to the fire department, they'll tell you that they're the better trained than TRA is to do all the EMS stuff. So how could we get to the point where we could just get rid of TRA and have the fire department do that stuff so they get the revenue from the insurance companies for handling that situation?
Well, and here's, you presented a good point. Had they had these conversations with the community, they probably could have had a lot more ideas brought to the table like that one, right? But when you only communicate with business leaders and, community leaders and maybe other elected officials, you're not bringing everyone to the table, and you're losing out on ideas.
Mm-hmm. So
So collaboration with the community is big, because you could have people present ideas like that, like how can we be more efficient? How can we do this? Maybe get rid of TRA. So I don't know what the answer is. Again, being somebody on the outside, we're not privy to all the information that goes into making those decisions, and that's part of the problem. I want full transparency on any fiscal decision being made. Everything that went into that decision needs to be disclosed, because I think that a lot of these decisions are made in back rooms, behind closed doors, and the people don't know about it until it's too late. The fire territory, we got put in a fire territory, nobody even knew about it. The Google thing, the people living in the area didn't even know about it until it was too late. And then the jail, they just didn't listen to anybody's, input on it. And I think that you're at a disadvantage if you think that government is the only solution for things. Government is not the only solution. We need to involve the community, and we need to have more collaboration.
The decisions have already been made. So that's one of the things in the agenda 20 sustainable. They already talk about how the decisions are already made, and the way our government is now, they're already full in, because you can see it everywhere. So they've taken the money. So the decisions are already made, and what they do, they call it the Delphi technique. So they do these things where they'll have meetings where you can come, and then or in some places it's different everywhere. It's but what they'll do is they'll have these meetings saying oh, we're going to do this. Do you want to do it? And then they'll have people in the meetings who kind of direct and if you disagree, they kind of block you. But most of the decisions have already been made. So, and that's why they don't really talk to anybody else, because they're just going with the plan. And you see that with Republicans, Democrats, and some people say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. But they write it, and then they have manuals, and you can read it, and then you can look and see it actually being played out in front of your eyes. So,
and then you just look at Fort Wayne City Council. For years and years, in recent years when I've been paying attention, before we got the supermajority of 6-3, it was 5-4, right? But a lot of the decisions would come out 8-1 or 7-2, with two of the Republicans being more on the liberty side of things, right? Yeah. So they're all working together. Look at the state legislature. Look at how many of those decisions, were coming out, 98-2,
Yeah.
In the House, 98-2. I mean, you have Republicans and Democrats there, and they're voting together on things, and they'll make it sound like, oh, well, we just work really well together, and we can come up with bipartisan, solutions, and we're doing what's in the best interest of the people. We're getting along, we're singing Kumbaya in the caucus rooms. Is that really the case, that they're just getting along and they're just voting together? Or, like you said, is there a plan? Is there a plan? Is that why the best thing for the people is when government doesn't make quick decisions, and sometimes they don't agree on things. You know what I mean? That's almost better. In the state legislature or something, because every time a law is enforced, every time a bill is passed and a law is enforced, it takes more freedom away from people. And every law ultimately is enforced at the end of a gun. And so we need to stop turning to government for the solution, because government grows bigger and bigger. And like you said, they might already have an agenda. It might already be planned out. So the more we can have community-based solutions, the better. But government likes control, so they're not going to like government or community-based solutions.
Well, talking about the like how like you'll have Republicans vote. So like what if you watch, you'll notice that when Republicans are in a minority, right? Well, then they'll vote. Most of them will vote against it, and they're like, well, we tried. We're in the minority. Couldn't get any of the Democrats to work with us. But when they're in a majority, they still can't pass anything because then there's always Republicans that go and vote, and it's the establishments that control it. So you can have liberty-minded, but they're only going to keep so many people who profess liberty, and then they're going to like the ones the ones that they fund who they know will play ball. That's well, at least that's what I know. Like I watch. That's why I'm no longer like I myself am no longer a Republican because like just getting let down so many times. Like on all levels, you know what I mean? Like, so, but yeah, and I think that like, I mean, if it's not, like, it's just clever. I study like manipulation and stuff, and I love politics, and like, Grant was talking about Machiavellian dictators or whatever, but like, and when I talked to Eric, I told him to read. What is it? It's like 48 strategies for war or something like that, and it shows you how to apply it to life. And then there's other books that take these concepts from like Machiavelli and all that, and it shows you, and then you can watch and you can see that like that's how politics work. It's cutthroat. It's a war, and like so many people go into it thinking it's they're gonna go and like that. Like you can just go and change, but like it's a machine for like it's. The people who control it. So,
well, and JBS, so the John Birch Society actually has a freedom index, and they've said that for years. They're like, look, when the Democrats are in the majority, the freedom index or the liberty scoring system, right? So the Republicans will get higher liberty scores, right?
Yeah.
When the Democrats are in control, but when the Republicans are in control, you see those scores go down. Like they're really not working that hard to pass things when they have the opportunity to benefit the people, and so that is kind of interesting and concerning. I will say that they're not fighting that hard. It's kind of like they don't want things to change. They want to have the status quo. They want a slow. It's like the concept of the Overton window, right? So the concept of the Overton window is you have Republicans over here, you have Democrats over here, and you have this Overton window, which is the space in between. And so as the radical left is pushed more left, that Overton window has moved. And now a lot of our Republicans that call themselves conservatives, for one, I don't think you can be a conservative if you continually vote to increase the size of government and raise taxes. You're not a conservative. I'm sorry. Those are not conservative values. So stop calling yourself conservative. If you want to call yourself a Republican, go right ahead. But you're not a conservative. You're a moderate. So we've had a lot of Republicans who have become moderates. And what we would have called a moderate Democrat 30 years ago, we're calling them Republican now.
Yeah.
Because that Overton window has moved. And we need to stand over here on the right, and we need to like we're playing tug of war and like pull our Republicans back over to our side and move that Overton window. And I don't know. I mean, it is kind of suspicious that they've kept it moving, and it's just like slowly moving, and they're not really fighting to bring it back when they have control and they have the opportunity to do that. They're just letting the needle continue to move to the left. And we really need that to change. We need to figure out why that's going on. I mean, some people would say it's shadow government, elites, global elites kind of pulling the puppet strings on things.
Money does run everything.
Yeah.
Well, just like on county council, it went from 6-1, 6 Republicans and 1 Democrat to 7 Republicans, and nothing's. I don't think county council's gotten more conservative with 7 Republicans versus 6 Republicans.
Well, since Sheila's left,
yeah.
They passed the fire districts and the jail, and you know what I mean? It's like, it's not. It doesn't really seem much different. No, it doesn't. And I'm a constitutional fiscal conservative, and I want to do right by the people. And I think that government, should be small, taxes should be low, and we should have, fiscal responsibility. It should be of the utmost importance to those in government, and especially those controlling our money. They need to be good stewards because it's our money. It's the people's money. Yeah. Government doesn't have money. Government doesn't produce a product. Government doesn't generate its own revenue. They take money from us and they spend that. Yeah. And with that comes a great responsibility. And I really don't think that they understand that. Yeah. And so I don't think they're being good stewards of our money. No. There are a couple. Ken seems to be a holdout on everything. He's a conservative, and he says no. He'll be upfront with him. No, I'm not voting for this. I don't agree with it. I'm not voting for it. It's not in the best interest of the people. And so I'm probably going to be like Ken in that way, where I'm going to be like, no, I'm not voting for it because it's not in the best interest of the people. So, and I have my eyes out for who I'd be able to work with and who I can't. And maybe for a couple of years I just join and I'm one of the one of those that doesn't vote for things until we finally get other people who decide they want to be on the same page. So
yeah, that's good. It's hard to there's a dream team of Liberty people. Like I know Eric. I like most of what Eric does, and there's so many people who, especially the ones that didn't get invited to that last debate, so many of them are liberty minded, but they get pushed on the outside of the Republican Party, and you watch that, and I'm like, man, those are people when I talk to the average person, and I do a lot of just, I've been in militias, I've done a lot of just weird stuff, just because I was like, I'll join it, whatever, we'll see what it's about, and what they're pushing a lot of times, most people that's what most people want, and then when you talk about more black areas, I have yet. So I used to work in some government housing, right? Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, in those neighborhoods, I have never seen a Republican go, but I see Democrats all day long. And you talk to a lot of them have conservative values. Mm-hmm. And so, but they are brainwashed into voting if you're black, you vote Democrat or whatever. But one of the things is nobody actually goes there to challenge that. Mm-hmm. And then, because if they did, because there are blacks that make money, and when you talk to the ones that make money, they are pretty much conservative. Mm-hmm. And then some of them even do, I know some of them voted for Trump. And when you talked about the Overton window, Trump is kind of that, he's a Democrat. If you look at Trump's policies, he's a 90s Democrat. Because they were for sealing the border, they were for all that in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And then after, when no move. So now Trump is a far right, which doesn't make sense to me because he pushed for gun control. He did all those things. Yeah. But, I hope.
A lot of this fundamental transformation of America started with Obama. Yeah. And he did that. He had a speech on how he wanted to fundamentally transform America. And I think people at the time were like, yeah, whatever. This guy's full of it. Yeah. Well, look now. He did. He started the fundamental transformation of America.
We have Bush Sr., which he said, he talked about the New World Order.
Yes, he wanted the New World Order.
And then you have
global elites.
They talked about, was Bush Jr., who signed in, he actually was the one that signed the soft treaty for Agenda 21. And then you have Bill, there's a line. Mm-hmm. So Obama was
but that was
the culmination of
with him it was really we're going to pick up the pace and we're going to start really before it was more behind the scenes. It was more they'd say Bush Sr. He wanted the New World Order. He was very vocal about that. He thought that was a good thing. But again, I just don't think people were paying attention. Just like with Obama, they're like, whatever, you saying these things, and people really weren't paying attention. But under Obama, it just really seemed to pick up pace. Yep. You know what I mean? And then, even when Trump was in office, it was still happening. We just didn't see it. Oh, yeah. It was happening behind the scenes. Oh, I think a lot of these things with the global elites and all this, I think it was still going on. even though we had Trump in office, having Trump in office actually gave everybody a false sense of security, I guess, because he was doing great things. He was making us energy independent. He was, strengthening our country again and flexing our muscles and with other countries and stuff. So we saw the things he was doing, but they were still doing these things behind the scenes, and we just didn't see it.
Yeah.
And I somewhat think that what happened in 2020 is perfect vision, right? And I'm a God-fearing Christ follower. So I truly believe that God used that as an opportunity to open our eyes to what was going on.
Yeah.
Because had Trump stayed in there, these things still would have been happening. We wouldn't have seen it. And Trump leaving office, and it started with COVID. So COVID, and then everybody was at home. They had nothing else to do because they were locked down, and they started going down the rabbit holes and educating themselves. And then the election happened. I look back, and in the time, I didn't see it.
Yeah.
But reflecting on that, it really looks like God used that as an opportunity to open our eyes.
Well,
2020, it was there's no mistake. 2020 is perfect vision.
Yeah.
And so I think that a lot of patriots were awakened during that time and started paying attention and seeing what was going on, and now they're trying to fight back. I mean, we're about to lose our country. Our kids aren't going to have a future. I don't want my kids to grow up under some Marxist communist regime. I want my kids to have freedom. They're never going to have the amount of freedom and opportunities that I did, but I want to try to fight as much as I can for them to preserve that for them.
Yeah. Yeah, like that's my fear too. Although I don't really think it's going to be a Marxist regime. I don't know what it's going to, because the way the World Economic Forum, that when they talk about new capital, it's not I honestly, looking back, I think most of the fascism, the communism, and just a mix of it, I think those were experiments, because now what they're doing is they're doing a mix of that. So America is, and we're heading towards communism, but we're also fascist currently, economically, because the banks, so the losses of banks and big businesses are privatized, or they're funded by us. So we pay for when they fail. They get to keep their when they succeed. I forget what it's called. Fractional reserve.
Fractional reserve banking.
Yeah, that's fascism. Now we're having these public-private partnerships here, and people don't realize how much the government actually owns the people of big corporations and stuff. But unless, and I think I think the country's lost, but I think the state, you can resist on the state level and in your county and stuff like that. So people like you, people like Eric, people like Grant, very important. Michael Beckwith, very important.
Well, and we need to do that. We need to take back. We need to secure our state, right? Because right now, the federal government is a lost cause. Yeah. And until we get enough states that are willing to stand on their sovereignty and then come together to take back the federal government. I mean, even if you get Trump back in there, we still have to do that. And we have to secure our county level government, we need to secure so many counties in the state to say this is what the people want to secure the state, right?
Yeah.
And so the state needs to stand on their sovereignty. We have a lot of things. What is it? The Ninth Amendment?
Yeah.
10th Amendment, 9th Amendment. Powers to the states. That any powers that are not given to the federal government are given to the state. 10th? Okay. So that's my walking dictionary over there. So the 10th Amendment, so the state needs to stand on the 10th Amendment more and say, no, we're not going to let you push this federal junk in our state. We're going to stand sovereign on this. And they need to stand on their sovereignty more, and they're not. They lack the backbone in order to do that, and it's because of the money. They want the money to keep flowing down the pipeline.
And education, people. So the only reason we're here is because our schools don't actually teach. I'm learning all this stuff, local governments. I was never taught that. We had government class, but not in depth, because I think that should be a primary once you're in middle school, that should be a primary thing they teach you, so that you understand your rights and And then
Rights and responsibilities
Yeah.
as a citizen.
because then that's why some people are out of, because they don't think they can do anything, because nobody knows what you can do. So they feel like, oh, we vote him in, he's not doing what we want, so we just sit there and which with the Seymour thing, I'm not very. I try to look at the statutes and states and for different and counties as well. But like I was like, well, I was trying to look up and see if you could recall your mayor or how you recall your mayor.
We're not a recall state.
Yeah. So, but
Yeah, and what I'll say with that is, so I'm the founder of Indiana Freedom Coalition. So we formed back in 2021, and that was mainly to inform people and educate them about their rights and responsibilities as a citizen of, as we the people, as a citizen of this country, a citizen of this state, and to reclaim their power as we the people, because the government keeps usurping power from us. And so I'm also a constitutional coach through Patriots Academy, so I teach biblical citizenship classes, because it's very important for Christians to get off the sideline and get involved. We need the church involved, right? We need Christians involved. We need Christ followers in government, and we need them to get elected, because what's happened is, as Christians have sat on the sidelines, we've had this void that's been filled by the unrighteous, and that's why we're in this downward spiral of depravity, as I like to call it.
Yeah.
And so we need to reclaim that. We need people to know their rights and responsibilities and be empowered to be part of the process and be involved.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, we're a country of, by, and for the people.
Yeah.
For, of, and by the people. And so we need the people to be involved. They're a key component to that, and we need to start reclaiming our power and fighting back. You know what I mean? We need to take a stand and say, we think we're in the minority just because the government doesn't agree with us, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people feel the same way, and they don't like the government, interfering in their lives and overstepping. And but if you don't make your voice heard, and I give the government the benefit of the doubt. Okay, maybe they don't know. Okay, because we've not been vocal, we've been asleep. And so, just like if you run a business and you have an employee, and then employee's not doing their job the way they're supposed to, if you don't inform them of that, then they're going to think they're doing their job fine and continue doing it that way. And you're going to be like, they're not doing their job. But if you don't speak up, how are they supposed to know? Yeah. So we need to speak up. We need to make sure the government knows that our thoughts and our concerns. But it's hard when they won't engage with us, right? They just ignore us. And so, I don't know what we were going. You were saying some really good stuff, and I wanted to jump in there.
Is there anything you want to say to close?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. My goal is to prioritize people and principles over politics. I'm a constitutional fiscal conservative, and I'm hoping to bring a fresh perspective and common sense to the council, and make the people a priority again and give them a voice on the council. And with that, I'd appreciate your vote on or before May 7th. So.